This video will be on homework on exercise 1A, which is found on page 8, and here are the questions that we will be going through today. So for question 2c, we are given this equation, 5h minus 4, the whole thing squared, and this is equal to 81. And you're supposed to solve the equation. So what does it mean by solve? It means that you're supposed to find out what h is. So first, since there is a square, we will square root both sides. Square root both sides to form 5h minus 4, and this would then be equal to the plus minus square root of 81. So remember to have your plus minus sign in here. Next, 5h would then be equal to 4 plus minus the square root of 81. And note that the square root of 81 is actually equal to 9. So this is plus minus 9. So 5h would then be equal to 13, or it can also be equal to negative 5. So 13 is gotten by having 4 plus 9, whereas negative 5 is gotten by having 4 minus 9. So h would then be equal to 13 divided by 5, or it can also be equal to h can also be equal to negative 5 divided by 5, and this would give us negative 1. So you can either leave h as 13 over 5, or you can write 2.6. So this is question 2c. Let's now move on to question 2d. Question 2d. So now you're given the equation 7 minus 3k, the whole thing squared, and this is equal to 9. This is equal to 9 over 16. So, similar to question 2c, we will first square root both sides of the equation to get 7 minus 3k on the left hand side, and on the right hand side we will square root 9 over 16. Remember to have your plus minus sign as well. If you key square root 9 over 16 into your calculator, you realize that you actually get you actually get 3 over 4. And then it's plus minus 3 over 4 because we have the plus minus sign over here. Okay, so now we just need to subtract 7 on both sides of the equation to get negative 7. This is negative 3k. Negative 3k would then be equal to negative 7 plus minus 3 over 4. So negative 3k would either be equal to negative 6.25, or it will be equal to negative 7.75. However, this is not all. We still need to find the value of k. So k would then be equal to negative 6.25 divided by negative 3. Divided by negative 3. Which would then give us 25 over 12. Since this is an exact number, it's in fractions, we will just leave it as 25 over 12. So there is no need to round it off to 3 significant figures. On the right hand side, we would have negative 7.75 divided by negative 3. And then this would then give us 31 over 12. So you can leave it as 31 over 12, or you can leave it as 2 and 7 over 12. Likewise for 25 over 12, you can leave it as 2 and 1 12 as well. So either this or this, either this or this, don't put both. So in this case, I'll just keep one of them, and that's all. Now let's move on to question 3a. Question 3a. Note that for question 3a, you're supposed to complete the square. If you refer to your textbook, in the question, it says complete the square for x squared plus So in your textbook it says complete the square for x squared plus 20x. So 20, this is the coefficient of x. So let's write on the side. If we have 20, we divide this by 2. This is equal to 10. So 20 is the coefficient of x, that's why we choose it. Okay, and then to complete the square, all we need to do is x plus 20, plus 10. Plus 10, the whole thing squared, minus 10 squared. So basically, this 10 over here is from here. Let me use a different color. This 10 here is actually from here. Okay? And then if we simplify this further, we will keep x plus 10 squared minus 100. So 10 squared is equal to 100. And that is all. For question 3, part D, we are given x squared minus 2 over 9x. And we are supposed to complete the square for this. So same thing, we have something square minus another thing square. So since there is x in here, since we have x over here, we would first write x. Then let's take a look at the coefficient of x, which is this. So this is our coefficient of x. Our coefficient of x is negative 2 over 9. So we just need to divide this by 2. And this would be equal to negative 2 over 9 multiplied by half, which would then be equal to negative 1 over 9. So we just need to copy this in here. Minus 1 over 9, negative 1 over 9. Okay so far? And then this would then be equal to x minus 1 over 9 squared minus. So when you key into your calculator, make sure that you have the brackets, because if it's just minus 1 over 9 squared, what you get is actually negative 1 over 81. However, if you have negative 1 over 9 the whole thing squared, key this into your calculator, you'll get positive 1 over 81. So the brackets are very important because it will show whether is it positive or is it negative. So in this case, it should be, this should, so everything in here, this portion here is positive, but negative of that positive thing would be negative. So it would be minus 81. Let's now move on to question 4. Question 4F. In question 4F, you're supposed to complete the square for negative x squared plus 13x minus 13 divided by 2. Okay, this is equal to, so the first step would be to factorize out the negative number. So we factorize out negative, and then we are left with x squared minus 13x minus 13x, close bracket, and then subtract 13 over 2 on the outside. So whatever that goes into the bracket only contain x. Only the terms that contain x would be inside the bracket. So for example, there's x in these two terms, but there's no x in 13 divided by 2. That's why we leave it outside the brackets. Then the next step would be to complete the square for x squared minus 13x. So since it may be a bit confusing, let's first complete the square for x squared minus 13x outside first. So this is equal to, so same thing, since we are trying to complete the square, we have something squared minus another thing squared. So first, what we need to do is we will take a look at what is the coefficient of x. So the coefficient of x in here is equal to negative 13. Negative 13 divided by 2, that will be negative 13 over 2. Okay, so for step, since this expression is in terms of x, we will first have x in here, so x would be the first term, and then since we have minus negative 13 over 2, we will then put that in here. Okay, so far so good. And then let me just shift this to the side. Thereafter, if we simplify this, we would have x minus 13 over 2, the whole thing squared, minus 169 divided by 4. Okay, so now we have completed the square for x squared minus 13x, but we still need to substitute it back into this expression over here. So let's do that right now. So okay, so I have, okay, let me move this aside first. Let me make it smaller. Let me move it to the side. Okay, and then I'll draw a line here. Okay, so this portion would now be equal to negative, big bracket, x minus 13 over 2, close bracket and square, minus 169 over 4, and close bracket, minus 13 over 2. We would then remove the brackets. So negative, so I will have negative multiplied by this whole thing first, which would give me negative x minus 13 over 2, the whole thing squared, and then next negative times negative, that would give me positive, so plus 169 over 4. And don't forget about this, minus 13 over 2, and then this would then give me negative x minus 13 over 2, whole thing squared, plus 143 divided by 4, or you can leave it in its decimal place, which is 35.75 as well. So here is the solution for question 4F. We will now move on to question 5. For question 5a, we are given this equation, x squared plus 2x minus 5 equal to 0, and we are asked to solve it. This equation to solve this equation, you should use completing the square, because this exercise 1a is on completing the square. So first, I would keep all the terms that contain x on the left hand side of the equation, and those terms that do not have x, I'll move them to the right hand side. So I'll move 5 over to the right hand side. Next, I'll complete the square for x squared plus 2x. So to complete the square, I'll have something square minus another thing square. So since it's in terms of x, I'll put x in first. The coefficient of x is 2. So 2 divided by 2, this would be equal to 1. So, and it's positive 1. So plus 1 and 1 in here. And this whole thing would be equal to 5. So let me rewrite it. I will have x plus 1, the whole thing squared, minus 1, and this is equal to 5. I can then bring 1 over to the right hand side. I will add 1 on both sides of the equation, and that would give me 6. So this, from here onwards, it will be similar to how we solve question 2c and question 2d. First, square root both sides of the equation, and that would give me x plus 1 equal to plus or minus the square root of 6. I can then subtract 1 from both sides of the equation to have negative 1 plus minus the square root of 6. Then this would either give me negative 1 plus square root of 6, or x can also be equal to negative 1 minus the square root of 6. So the one on the left hand side would give me 1.45, and it's rounded off to 2 decimal places because that is what the question asked for. On the right hand side, I would have negative 3.45. So to get 1.45 and negative 3.45, all you need to do is key them into your calculator. And this is rounded off to 2 decimal places as well. So this is how you solve question 5a using completing the square. We will now move on to question 7a. Question 7a. So we are given this equation a plus 4, a multiplied by a plus 4, that is equal to 3a plus 1. First, we expand the expression on the left. A multiplied by a, that would give us a square. A multiplied by 4, that would give us 4a. And this is equal to 3a plus 1. Next, I can subtract 3a on both sides of the equation so that all of my terms that contain a would be on the left hand side of the equation. So I have a squared plus 4a minus 3a, that is equal to 3a plus 1 minus 3a. So since there's a here, there's 3a here as well, I'll cancel them out. And then next I will get a squared plus a alone, and this is equal to positive 1. Next, I will complete the square for this expression over here. So since I'm completing the square, I will have something square minus another thing square. Okay, and that should be equal to 1. So since this equation in this expression equation a squared plus a equal to 1 is in terms of a, right? So I will have a in here. Next, the coefficient of a, although it's not written there, it is actually 1. So 1 divided by 2, that would just be half. So I would have 1 over 2 here, plus 1 over 2, and I would have 1 over 2 in here as well. Simplify this, and I will get a plus half, this whole thing squared, minus 1 over 4, equal to 1. Now I will add 1 over 4, 1/4, on both sides of the equation, so that I can bring all the constant terms to the right hand side of the equation. And this would give me a plus half, the whole thing squared, equal to 5 over 4. Do you notice that this is similar to what we have been doing so far for question 2c, 2d, and 5a? All we need to do now is square root both sides of the equation, and that would give us a plus half. on the left hand side and plus minus the square root of 5 over 4. You can choose to remove these two brackets as well. Oops, but keep this. Now we just need to subtract half from both sides of the equation, and that would give us negative half plus a is equal to negative half plus minus the square root of 5 over 4. So this is basically saying that a is either equal to half plus the square root of 5 over 4, or a is equal to negative half minus the square root of 5 over 4. This is why you get two different values of a. This would then be equal to 0.618. To figure out this number, you just need to key the working into your calculator. And this is rounded off to 3 significant figures as well. So let me write that down. On the right hand side, this negative half minus the square root of 5 over 4, that would be equal to negative 1.62, which is also rounded off to 3 significant figures. Let's move on to the last question, question 8. In question 8, we are given this equation, y squared minus ay minus 6 equal to 0. So some of you use the formula to solve this equation, to solve for the value of y. However, you can also do this using completing the square. So let me show you both of the methods. So first method is to complete the square. So what we need to do is, first we add 6 to both sides of the equation to bring the constant term to the right hand side of the equation. Next, since we are completing a square for y squared minus ay, we will have something square minus something square again. And this will be equal to 6. 6 is from here. Okay? And since this is in terms of y, I will have y here. Next, let's look at the coefficient of y. It is a. So we just need to have subtract minus a over 2 and minus a over 2 in here as well. So there is a minus sign over here because of this minus sign. Same for this. Simplify this and we will get y minus a over 2, the whole thing squared, minus a squared over 4. And this is equal to 6. We can then add a squared plus 4 on both sides of the equation. Oops. Sorry. Yep, if we add a squared plus 4 on both sides of the equation, this is what we will get. We can then simplify the right hand side to have 24 plus a squared divided by 4. And this whole thing is equal to y minus a over 2, the whole thing squared. Next, we just need to square root both sides of the equation like how we did question 2, question 5, and question 7. Just square root both sides and remember your plus minus sign. This is what you will get. We can then we can then add a over 2 on both sides of the equation, and we will be able to get this. Ta-da! So this is your answer for y. But note that you can simplify this expression further. So let me just show you. Remember that 4 can be written as 2 squared. So basically, you will have square root 24 plus a squared divided by 2. And you can combine these two fractions together since they have the same denominator to get this. So there you go. This would be your answer for y. The second method utilizes the formula, the quadratic formula. Do you remember what the formula is? The formula is x is equal to negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So this is what we have, y squared minus ay minus 6 equal to 0. Note that the a in here is not equal to the a in here. They are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. Instead, the a in this expression is actually the coefficient of y squared, which is 1. So a in this case would be 1. This is actually b. And negative 6. This is c. So if I want to substitute that into my equation, that would give me x equal to negative a plus minus the square root of negative a squared minus 4 multiplied by 1 multiplied by negative 6. And this whole thing is over to a, which is 2 multiplied by 1. So let me just reiterate again. A in this case is 1. That's why where a should be, I have replaced it with 1 here as well. And b in this case is equal to negative a. So so all of this b has been replaced by negative a. And lastly, we have c. So c is negative 6. Negative 6. So I replace it where c is supposed to be. This is b. So if we simplify this, negative multiplied by negative a, that would give me just a alone, positive a. Plus minus a squared, because negative a, the whole thing squared, is equal to positive a squared. Minus 4 multiplied by 1 multiplied by negative 6. If I key that into my calculator, I would get plus 24. And this whole thing is divided by 2. So there you go. Here is the second method to solve question 8. So since all of you should know how to complete the square by now, there is one extra question for you to complete. This is from exercise 1A as well, which is in page 8 of your textbook. Please complete question 7B. You're supposed to solve the equation. So solve the equation. And the equation is d multiplied by d minus 4 equal to 2 bracket d plus 7, close bracket. So solve this equation using completing the square method. So use this method, do not use any other method. So remember that completing the square, you will need to write it in terms of something squared minus another thing squared. Okay, this is the hints that I will give you. Oops, minus something squared. And you first need to expand this equation before solving.